Greetings, fellow papists. I always try to avoid becoming a sedevacantist, but the canonization of JPII really bothered me. While I can't judge his personal piety, his ecumenical ventures seem to me to be totally against previous papal teachings. Since canonizations are infallible, and since saints are to be emulated, should I invite a bunch of Protestants, Buddhists, and Muslims so we can all pray together to the Supreme Being, each in our own way?
No. No, first you've got to understand that saints are not always to be emulated. Canonization does not make everything the saint did while alive right. Because they weren't a saint then. They were human. If you read not just the horrific correspondence between Saints Jerome and Augustine, or Jerome and Augustine if you prefer, or the really nasty, nasty persecution of St. Wilfrid of York by St. Bernard of Clairvaux. Look at St. Celestine V, who was the last pope before Benedict XVI to abdicate. He was a very holy man, he was a hermit, and he was a horrible pope. It's terrible. Made all sorts of awful decisions. Because he didn't know anything about being pope. You know, it's a skill set, ladies and gentlemen, like running a camera. So, that's the first thing. You know, you would like everything a saint does to be emulable.
Yeah.
But if you study the lives of any of them in detail, you're going to find they were human beings, and they made terrible mistakes on them. That's the first thing. The second thing is that as far as John Paul II's life went, his personal piety, the last 10 years of his life were horrible. They were a dry martyrdom if ever I've heard of one. Moreover, he seems, judging by his last book, to have gotten something of a handle on the ways in which he had perhaps failed the church in his own estimation. It was interesting to me, for instance, one of the complaints I always had about him was that his episcopal appointments were terrible. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them.
Right.
And in his last book, what does he say? One of my major mistakes was not taking more time with episcopal appointments. And that last year and a half, he was alive. We had a flurry of really good appointments to dioceses. You know, so much so I look at them and think, you know, where have you been all my life? Well, this is the Pope we wanted in 1978,
yeah.
You know? But at any rate, the sad truth of the matter is that you cannot look to the example of any single saint for an absolutely A1 perfect blueprint of how to do things. Even St. Ignatius, for instance, for all you Jesuit fans, said that he had been very much mistaken to be so physically penitential when he was younger because it damaged his health. It made it harder for him to do things when he was older. So.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to play especially hard devil's advocate on this one because I know all these people who, and all their objections, so I'm going to state all their objections and stuff like that. So, okay, where's the evidence that John Paul II recanted on his deathbed over the ecumenical fiasco?
Okay, well, firstly, you're implying that you've got the authority to make that demand. You don't. I don't. We don't. Popes have made terrible mistakes, but there's no living authority that can tell them what they need to do.
Well, okay,
that's the first thing. Secondly, you've got to say that what he did was an offense against faith and morals. A canonical offense? No, I don't think so. Was it scandalous? Yeah. Was it bad behavior? Yeah. But it wasn't immoral. He certainly went out of his way to give all kinds of caveats about it. And although personally I think it was the wrong thing to do, it's not up to me to demand that he recant.
Well, right, it's not up to you, but in order to be a saint, he would need to recant.
Recant what? When did Saint Bernard of Clairvaux recant his persecution of Saint Wilfrid of York? No.
Well, did that involve a heresy?
The Pope made a very big point of having them pray separately, so to avoid indifferentism.
Okay. Well, what would you say to the charge that millions of souls were lost because that ecumenical stuff creates and invites lukewarmness and exploration toward other faiths? I
would say there may be a lot of truth to that, but I don't know how much. I'm sure I'll find out when I go up to be judged myself.
Okay. See, that sticks in a lot of these people's craw.
It has every reason to stick in their craw. But what I'm saying is, you can dislike tremendously what a pope does. All right? Clement XIII knuckling under to the pressure of the European monarchs and abolishing the Jesuits. That was a horrible thing to do. Absolutely horrible. It had the repercussions of that, amongst other things, emptied Mexico, large stretches of Mexico, of resident priests. And you know what the result of that was?
What?
Loss of millions of souls. Pius XII, backing 2/3 of the bishops of Australia in the big fight they had there in the 1950s over the Catholic labor movement. I'm sure some souls were lost there, because it looked as though the church had come down on the side of the socialists and communists.
Interesting.
Now, Pius XI, betraying the Cristeros, in effect, you think that didn't cause souls to be lost?
That's true.
But who am I? I mean, I can make an historical judgment. I can tell you I don't like what they did, especially when it's a matter of life and death. Pius VII, airily giving away rights of the church in France to Napoleon, the Catholics had died for. In the Concordat. You know, again, ladies and gentlemen, just because you don't know something doesn't mean it wasn't important. Okay? Just remember that.
Also, that happened a long time ago.
Well, that makes it all
we're living in exceptional circumstances
now. Yeah, I know. Because we're all being persecuted for our faith, and we're all losing our jobs, and we're starving, we're being tortured. Yeah, I know.
We've never been in this sort of crisis.
No,
you said yourself, everything's being attacked.
That's right. And you know what? The worst of it is that my personal sensibilities are being outraged. And if I had the kind of guts that I have online, why, I'd start evangelizing my parents and my family and my boss and my friends and like... Oh. I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Well, that's ad hominem, Charles.
Yeah, it is ad hominem, but so is why didn't the Pope recant? You throw an ad hominem, I'll give you one right back. You know, it's like by beginning a thing. As a heretic, how do you feel about? I mean, there are these ad hoc assumptions.
Yeah.
That just...
You know what's funny is people still aren't going to be satisfied by anything you've said.
No, I know. Everyone's going to be pissed off.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Twinkle, twinkle, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Up above the world so high, like a tea tray in the sky. I know, ladies and gentlemen, we all want easy, pat answers. But you know, you can't get them out of your own life, can you? Why do you sin? Why is it you've always got something to take to the confessional? Why is it you're nasty on occasion? Why is it you talk before knowing? Why is it you are silent when you do know? Why do you do that? I'll tell you why you do it. You do it for the same reason I do. Because we're fallen human beings. And we're stupid, and we're weak, and we're cowardly. And every pope that has ever been is as much a one of us as everyone else who's ever been. I have always found it far easier to judge the misdeeds of others than my own. I have always found it far easier to judge the misdeeds of those in authority over me than my own. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot John Paul II did, especially the Assisi stuff, that just drives me crazy. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But I'm sure if I had been a Cristero betrayed by Pius XI, a Vendéen feeling betrayed by Pius VII, or maybe even a resident of the German diocese handed over by Julius III to the Lutherans, speaking of loss of souls, I don't know, maybe I'd have been upset had I lived then. I don't know. Expect perfection, ladies and gentlemen, out of anyone on the side of the grave, and you'll be gravely mistaken. But if you really want perfection out of somebody, start with you and then move on to everyone else.